The rain had been falling for hours, not heavy enough to flood the streets, but steady enough to make everything feel slower, heavier, as if the world itself was pausing to breathe. The kind of rain that soaked into clothes without permission and into thoughts without warning. The hospital lights glowed pale against the wet pavement, flickering faintly through the fog, and inside those walls, a woman sat trembling on a cold metal bench, clutching her phone with shaking hands. Her heels were soaked. Her designer coat, worth more than some people earned in a year, hung loosely on her shoulders, forgotten. Her mascara had smudged, not from vanity, but from tears she hadn't planned to cry. She had money, power, influence. She had everything the world said a woman should want. And yet, in that moment she whispered the words that would haunt her forever. "I can't go. I can't do this alone." Her voice cracked as she stared at the hospital doors, the automatic glass sliding open and closed like a heartbeat she couldn't control. Somewhere beyond those doors, a life waited on her decision. A life that depended on courage she suddenly couldn't find. Outside, across the parking lot, an old pickup truck coughed before going silent. Its paint was chipped, its headlights uneven, but it had made it here, again. A small toolbox rattled in the back, and a child's worn backpack leaned against the seat. The engine heat still lingered as the driver stepped out, wiping grease from rough hands with a cloth that had seen better days. A single father, a mechanic by trade, a man who had learned how to survive without asking the world for favors. He had come to the hospital for something simple, an old injury flaring up, a promise to his daughter that he would get it checked. But life, as it often did, had rewritten the plan. He noticed her before she noticed him. She stood apart from everyone else, like someone afraid of being touched by reality. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, lips trembling as if holding back a scream. Nurses passed by without stopping. People assumed someone like her had everything under control, but pain doesn't wear labels. He hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who stepped into other people's lives. Experience had taught him that sometimes kindness came with consequences. Still, something about her silence felt louder than any cry. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled, almost offended at first. Then her composure cracked. Tears spilled freely, no longer polite or controlled. "I can't go in there," she whispered. "I thought I could. I always thought I could handle anything. But I can't do this alone." There was no recognition in her eyes, no awareness of who he was or what he owned or didn't own, just fear, raw and human. He nodded slowly, as if he understood something unspoken. "You don't have to do it alone," he said simply. Those words landed heavier than he realized. She laughed through her tears, a sound broken and hollow. "You don't understand," she said. "People expect me to be strong. I'm supposed to be the one who walks in first, the one who never hesitates." "Being strong doesn't mean being alone," he replied. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just honest. The rain picked up again, tapping against the concrete like 1,000 quiet reminders that time was still moving. She looked at him then, not at his worn boots or his oil-stained hands, but at his eyes. They were calm, steady, the kind of eyes that had seen struggle and chosen kindness anyway. "My daughter's inside," she whispered finally. "She's scared. And I promised her I'd be brave." He swallowed, thinking of his own child waiting at home with a bowl of cereal and a half-finished homework sheet. Thinking of the nights he'd sat beside a hospital bed pretending not to be afraid. "Then let's go be brave together," he said. She blinked. "You'd walk in with me?" He shrugged gently. "I've walked into worse with less." For a moment, the world felt still, then she nodded. They walked side by side toward the sliding doors. No grand gestures, no speeches, just two strangers carrying fear in different ways, choosing not to carry it alone. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and quiet urgency. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse glanced up, then back down at her chart. Name? The nurse asked. The woman answered, her voice steadier now. The nurse typed quickly, then looked at the man beside her. And you? He hesitated, then said, I'm with her. The words felt heavier than expected. They were led down a hallway lined with doors and whispers. Machines beeped softly behind closed curtains. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere else, someone laughed in relief. Life and fear intertwined in every direction. As they walked, her breathing slowed. She glanced at him again, studying his calm like it was something she could borrow. You didn't have to stay, she said quietly. I know, he replied, but I wanted to. They stopped outside a room. A doctor stood nearby, flipping through a chart. The moment stretched, fragile and heavy. She reached for the door handle, then froze. I'm scared, she admitted. He nodded once. So am I. She looked surprised. You are? Every day, he said. But fear doesn't mean stop. It just means move slower. Her lips trembled into the smallest smile. The door opened. Inside, machines hummed softly. A bed stood in the center. The air felt thick with waiting. She took a step forward, then another. Her hands shook, and without thinking, she reached out. He didn't pull away. Her fingers wrapped around his sleeve, not tightly, just enough to feel grounded. The doctor began speaking, explaining procedures, risks, timelines. Words floated past her, blurred by emotion. She nodded where appropriate, but her focus stayed on one simple thing: she wasn't alone. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time bent strangely in that room. At one point she whispered, I don't even know your name. He smiled faintly. You don't need to. But I want to. He hesitated, then told her. She repeated it softly, as if anchoring herself to something real. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The world kept turning, unaware that something delicate and profound was unfolding inside a hospital room. When the doctor finally stepped away, giving them a moment, she exhaled a breath she'd been holding for years. I don't know why you were there tonight, she said, but I think you saved me from breaking. He shook his head gently. You were already stronger than you thought. She looked at him, eyes glistening, and for the first time since the fear had taken hold, she believed it might be true. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of gratitude, of shared vulnerability, of a quiet understanding that some meetings are not accidents, but intersections. Outside the room, a nurse called his name softly, reminding him of his own reason for coming. He hesitated, torn between duty and instinct. I should go, he said. Her grip tightened for just a second, then loosened. Thank you, she whispered, for staying. He nodded, stepping back slowly, as if leaving too. Fast might break the fragile calm they'd built. As he turned toward the hallway, she spoke again, her voice steadier now. Will I see you again? He paused. The question hung in the air, unanswered, carrying the weight of possibility, uncertainty, and the quiet promise that sometimes the smallest moments change everything. He didn't answer right away. The hallway seemed longer than before, the fluorescent lights humming like they were waiting for his decision too. He looked back at her, standing there with her hands clasped together, shoulders no longer shaking but still heavy with everything she had carried inside her. There was something different in her eyes now. Not fear, not confidence, but a quiet openness, like a door left ajar. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think paths cross for a reason. She nodded slowly, as if storing that thought somewhere deep inside her chest. Then a nurse cleared her throat, gently reminding them both that time was moving again. He gave one last look, one last small smile, and turned down the hall. As he walked, his phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from home, a picture of a crooked drawing taped to a fridge, a sun in the corner and two stick figures holding hands. Below it, a message, I did my homework. Are you okay? He exhaled, something warm spreading through his chest. He typed back quickly, I'm okay. Be home soon. Behind him, she watched until he disappeared around the corner. The minutes that followed stretched and bent. Nurses came and went. Machines hummed steadily. She sat in the chair beside the bed, hands folded, eyes fixed on the slow rise and fall in front of her. Fear still lived there, but it had softened, reshaped by the quiet strength she had borrowed. Her phone buzzed, a dozen missed calls, messages from assistants, colleagues, people who expected answers. She turned the screen face down. For the first time in years, the world could wait. When the doctor returned, his voice was calm, careful, and kind. He spoke of procedures and probabilities, of steps forward instead of endings. She listened closely, nodding, absorbing every word. Her heart still raced, but it no longer felt like it would shatter. Hours passed. The rain stopped. Night pressed its face against the windows, dark and watchful. Somewhere down the hall, a vending machine hummed. Somewhere else, a child laughed, too loudly for a hospital, and was quickly hushed. Life moved on in fragments. She stood and stretched, feeling the ache in her legs, the weight of exhaustion settling into her bones. She thought of the man again, the way he had stood beside her without needing to fix anything, the way his presence had made space for her to breathe. She didn't even know why that mattered so much. Later, when the doctor returned with better news than she had dared hope for, her knees nearly gave out. Relief washed over her in a quiet, overwhelming wave. She pressed her hands to her face, laughing and crying at once. "It's going to be okay," the doctor said gently. She nodded, unable to speak. When the room finally emptied, she stepped out into the hallway again, heart lighter, step steadier. She didn't know what she was looking for, only that she was looking, and then she saw him. He sat near the far wall, elbows on his knees, phone in his hands, head bowed as if in thought. A paper cup of coffee sat untouched beside him. She hesitated, then walked toward him. "You're still here," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "I was waiting to hear if everything was okay." Her throat tightened. "It is, thanks to you." He stood, awkwardly brushing his hands against his jeans. "I didn't do anything." "You did," she said. "You stayed." They stood there for a moment, the space between them. No longer uncertain, but charged with something unnamed. "I should probably go," he said again, though his feet didn't move. She nodded, then surprised herself by asking, "Can I walk you out?" Outside, the air smelled clean, washed by rain. The parking lot glistened under the lights. His old truck sat where he'd left it, patient and unassuming. They stopped beside it. "I don't even know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "Sometimes people just need someone to stand there." She smiled faintly. "Still, I'd like to." She reached into her bag, pulling out a card, then hesitated. It felt too formal, too much like the world she lived in. Instead, she took his phone gently and typed her number, handing it back. "In case," she said quietly. He stared at the screen, then at her. "In case of what?" "In case life brings you back into my path." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Life seems good at that." They stood there a moment longer, neither quite ready to leave. "Drive safe," she said. "You too," he replied, then corrected himself with a soft chuckle. "I mean, take care." He got into his truck, the engine rumbling to life. As he pulled away, he glanced in the mirror. She was still standing there watching, one hand wrapped around her coat as if holding herself together. She didn't move until the taillights disappeared. Inside the hospital, she leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone in her strength. She felt supported by something unseen, something simple and human. That night, as she sat beside the bed once more, her phone buzzed. A message. "Made it home. Kids asleep. Thanks for today." She smiled, typing back before she could overthink it. "Thank you for not walking away." The reply came quickly. "Some things are worth stopping for." She stared at the screen, heart beating softly, steadily. Outside, the world continued in its quiet rhythm. Cars passing, lights blinking, lives intersecting in ways no one could plan. And somewhere between fear and hope, between chance and choice, something new had begun to take shape, fragile but real, waiting to be understood, waiting to grow, waiting to see what tomorrow might dare to ask of them both.